This week's Parshas Ve'eschanan, deals with when the Jewish people, well, let's say for Devarim as well, as we explained last week, the Ramban in his introduction, that it was written for the door for the generation that was about to enter the land of Israel. So it's a very interesting pasuk in this week's Parsha in Devarim chapter 6 verse 11, Uvatim Maleim Kol Tuv Asher Lo Milesa, the house is full of all good things which you did not fill. So the Gemara in Chulin derives from this verse that the Jewish people were permitted to eat non-kosher food, pig and bacon, during this time period. So as we'll go through the Gemara in Chulin in detail and come out with some interesting details of what happened, and then we'll see how this halacha is practical even today, even though we don't have this kaseh de chazer, even though we don't have this heter today, this permission to eat. So there's an interesting Gemara in Chulin Daf Yud Zayin 17a. The Gemara is discussing the Rabbi Akiva's point of view that basar nechira, piercing the meat, was a valid way of doing the slaughtering in the midbar. The Jews, there's a whole discussion among the Gemara how much of a slaughtering process did you need. The one that we have today, that is similar to when they entered the land of Israel. But in the Midbar, they ate something called basar nechira, pierced meat. So the Gemara has the following question. By Rav Yirmiyah asks the following question. Eirei basar nechira shehechnisu Yisrael imahem la'aretz mahu. That, as we pointed out, they were permitted a certain type of meat in the midbar, in the desert, but when they entered the land of Israel, they were not permitted to eat this anymore. They had to slaughter the animal in the way we used to now. So the question Rabbi asks, what about leftovers? It's true you can't slaughter the animal by piercing it anymore. You have to go through the rigorous process of shchita, of slaughtering. We want to minimize any pain to the animal and kill the animal as quickly as possible. And therefore, we cannot go through the process of basar nechira anymore. But the question is, what about meat we already were permitted? Any new meat I can't do, but what about meat I had left over from the midbar? Am I permitted to go ahead and use this meat and eat it when I'm in the land of Israel? That's the Gemara's question. So first, the Gemara wants to clarify the time frame. When are we asking this question? So Gemara says, Emas. When does this actually happen? Ilema b'sheva shekivshu. Well, we know that it took the Jewish people 14 years. Sheva shekivshu b'sheva shechuku. The first 7 years to conquest. And the next 7 years they were dividing the land. So this question Rabbi Yirmiyah had, are we talking about the first 7 years or the last 7 years? The Gemara says, if you say we're talking about the first 7 years, that can't be. The question can't be the first 7 years, because hashta, davar tamei ishtriluhu, if the Jewish people were able to eat treif, pig, bacon, Tiksiv, as we learn out from this week's Parsha Ve'eschanan, Uvatim Leim Kol Tuv, V'amar Rav Yirmiyah Barav, V'amar Rav Kasre de Chazeri, that when they conquered the land, they were permitted to have this type of food, this bacon. So basar nechira mibai. So is there any question? So food that was kosher in the midbar, now we're changing the method of shchita. So of course, if you could eat treif, bacon, pig, then during this time period anyway, because of the special dispensation It's a machlokes, it's a dispute between the Rambam and the Ramban, Maimonides and Nachmanides, on how far reaching this dispensation was, but everyone agrees you can eat this bacon during those time of conquest. So of course if you can eat 100% pure non-kosher, then certainly you can eat leftover meat that was kosher in the midbar. So it clearly wasn't talking about the first 7 years. And apparently, I guess, even though it was before the days of freezers, they must have some way to preserve this meat. And the question was, the next 7 years, were they permitted to eat this leftover meat? And the Gemara says, oh, Ella, must be to the 7 years afterwards. And the Gemara gives an alternative possibility. Iba zema la'ola b'shava shekivshu. No, really we're talking about the first 7 years. Even the first 7 years when the Jews entered the land of Israel, we want to know, can they eat the leftover meat from the wilderness? Right? But I thought you could eat any meat. You could eat treif meat, non-kosher meat, so certainly you could eat this. Ki ishtri lahu shlal shel ovdei chachavim. It was only the spoils captured from the ovdei avodah from the idol worshippers that became permitted. But they never permitted to eat non-kosher in general. Dido lo ishterle, but their own non-kosher food it never became permitted any more than it was before. So we see there was no special dispensation given for the Jews' own food, and therefore Rabbi Yirmiyah's query applies to the first 7 years. In fact, there was a soldier in the army, a character who when he used to go into the lands to fight, he used to say, kasri de chazeri, let's eat non-kosher. Of course, the heter is only if you conquered the land and there was in non-Jewish homes and they worshipped idols, that's what the Gemara is talking about. You can't go ahead and cook your own non-kosher food. So again, as I pointed out, that's a discussion, the Rambam and the Ramban, how far you take this heter. So that's the Gemara's question. According to one opinion, it's only the last 7 years, because the first 7 years if they could eat pig and bacon, they could certainly eat leftovers. And according to the second opinion, no, even the first 7 years is a question. You'd only eat non-kosher food that you found already that they were making in the pots. But to take your own non-kosher food, that wasn't permitted. So getting back to, that's the Gemara's question. Is one permitted to go ahead and eat leftover pierced meat that would not be permitted now, but you already have leftovers in the midbar? So the Gemara concludes, teiku. Let it stand. The question remains unresolved. Many say that teiku stands for Tishbi, meaning Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi, Yitaretz Kushias Vibayis, will answer up all your questions. And therefore, and some say, it doesn't really mean that, it was just to teach the kids that when you're teaching the little children or the older children that you should instill in them the importance of the Mashiach, so therefore the Eliyahu will come and answer all the questions. Or as the others say, it means tick, it's put into a suitcase, put away, and later on these questions will be answered. Why Eliyahu answers the questions and not Moshe Rabbeinu, that will be a separate shir on why Eliyahu answers the questions. Either way, the Gemara leaves it unresolved. So Rashi over there in the Gemara is bothered by, why do we need this? Why is the Gemara telling me this question about Basa Nechira or not? Like, what do I care about Basa Nechira? I don't have any Basa Nechira today. So why are you telling me something totally academic, irrelevant? So Rashi says, you're right, Ein HaChanami, there's nothing we learn practically from in Halacha L'Maisa because we don't have this pierced meat anymore. However, we have a general principle of Drush V'Kabel Schar. We learn Torah even if it's not Halacha L'Maisa. even if it's not practical. In fact, we have a concept even if it never happened. Like the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, we know there's a concept in the Torah of a ben soer or mora, a rebellious child. Rebellious children we do have even today, but not the legal definition, what the Gemara is talking about in Sanhedrin, a whole chapter on this ben soer or mora. So one opinion in the Gemara is that it never was, never will be. So why is the Gemara talk about it? Drush v'kabel schar, to learn how to give us more Torah, to learn to receive more reward. And of course, even if you don't have the exact example of a ben Torah Mora, but the different lessons we can learn out, as always, from the different metaphors. And similarly, the Gemara has a similar discussion by Ir Hanidachas, a city that the majority of people worship idols, so you destroy the town. Again, to some say that city never exists, the different lessons to learn from it, whether it existed or not, and therefore drush v'kabel schar. So that's what Rashi says. There's nothing real halacha l'maisa. There's nothing we're coming out practically from this, but nevertheless, it's still important to know. Comes along the Russian says, not only is it important to know, because drush v'kabel schar, but it's important, it is halacha l'maisa. How is it practical if we don't have this pierced meat anymore? So how is it practical? So the Rush says, I'll tell you how it's practical. We can find a similar case. There was something, at one point, all cheese was kosher. As long as the ingredients were kosher, one was permitted to eat it. At a certain time in Jewish history, the rabbis came along and prohibited gvinas akum, cheese that was manufactured by non-Jews, by Gentiles. And it wasn't the only thing, the different reasons behind it, but all we have to know is that even though the ingredients are kosher, but nevertheless the rabbi said you can't eat gvinas akum, you can't eat cheese which is all kosher, but if it's not manufactured by Jews, if the Jews aren't involved in the process, you can't eat it. So the question is, what happens? They got up, they made an announcement today and said all gvinas akum is no good, all cheese made by non-Jews isn't kosher. So what about leftover cheese? You had a 10-pound package of American cheese, the white kind, the yellow, orange, and you want to know if you could eat that. To make new cheese now, you have to be under the supervision. It has to be under the supervision of Jews. But what happens, and any cheese I make now under Gentile supervision, I can't eat. But what about cheese that at that point when I made it, there was no decree. I was permitted to eat kosher ingredients made from the Gentiles. So what about that leftover cheese? Could I eat that? So the rest says, let's go back. We have a precedent, the Gemara in Chulin we just discussed in Av Yud Zayin. The Gemara wanted to know, what about the pierced meat that was kosher in the desert, but not kosher later on? Is one permitted to eat this kosher meat? So that was kosher. So the Gemara left it unresolved. So the Rosh asks, what do we do when we only have a question that's unresolved? So the Gemara tells us we have a famous principle. Safek d'oraisa l'chumra. A doubt regarding a biblical law was strict on. A doubt regarding a rabbinic law we're lenient on. So when it comes to basa, nechira, pierced meat, that's dealing with a biblical law. So a doubt regarding a biblical law was strict on. So we say you wouldn't be able to eat it. But gvinas akam, that is only a rabbinic decree, and we have a principle, safek d'rabbanan l'kula, a doubt regarding a rabbinic law we're lenient on, and therefore it's permitted to eat the leftovers. That's what the Rush says. Again, so comes along the Birkei Yosef, the Chida, and he wants to take it a step further. We know we just finished the 3 weeks, we observed Tisha B'Av, and during the 9-day period for the Minhag Ashkenaz, Misha Nichnas Av B'Matin B'Simcha, when the month of Av comes, we reduce our reduce we reduce our joy, and one of the things we stay away from is meat and wine. And let's talk about meat. So they point out that there's and we know during the 9 days people have a custom. Sephardim have meat, different Sephardim have different customs. In fact, interesting, some Sephardim don't eat meat during Shiva, but they eat meat during the 9 days. Different Sephardim don't eat meat. Our minhag is during the 9 days we don't eat meat, but we do eat meat during Shiva. We don't eat meat during Aninas, the time period before burial. Then there's an Isser of Basav Ayayin. There's a prohibition of eating meat and wine. So the question is, you have meat during the 9 days, either before the 9 days. This year it was Sunday night, so you had a barbecue. So let's say you have leftovers from the barbecue, or let's say Shabbos you have leftovers. Is one permitted to eat the leftovers from before the 9 days, or during the 9 days when you had a siyam, when you were permitted to eat meat? It was one of the exceptions, so were you permitted to do it? So they point out to the Chidah refers us to the Gemara in Chulin about piercing meat in the wilderness, that the Gemara wants to eat the leftover meat. So the Rosh said it's a doubt on a biblical law was strict. However, when it comes to Gvinas Akum, which is rabbinical law, doubt by a rabbinical law lenient, so the Chidah entertains the question, eating meat during the 9 days is only a minhag, is only a custom. Although it's a very strong custom, and the Aruch HaShulchan has strong words, that those who violate the custom, they'll be bit by a snake. In other words, to infer that it's a very serious custom to follow. We don't just eat meat lightly during the 9 days. And therefore, the Rabbi Yosef wants to say maybe it's a doubt regarding the custom, and therefore we could be lenient and have leftovers. However, the custom is not that way. We don't accept the Birkei Yosef, and al pi svara, logically, we can make a distinction. Why? During the cases of the meat that's pierced in the wilderness, or the case where the non-kosher cheese, that's it. This cheese is never going to become permitted again, unless, of course, the rabbis change this decree, this Gvinas Akum, but ain't Basin doesn't change unless we have different laws. You have to find a Basin greater in number and wisdom, and many in different issues with that. But either way, they point out that by the case we have a principle of davar sheyesh lo matirin, that something that's to become permitted later, we don't rely on bittul. Like if milk falls in the chicken soup, so that's it. So we say we know if it's a small amount, we nullify the milk, because if not, the food would be prohibited. By the case of the 9 days, we don't have to rely on that. We could just put it away into the freezer, save it for after the 9 days, save it for Shabbos, and therefore many poskim don't like the leniency of the Chidah, and the minhag is for those who don't eat meat during the 9 days, we don't eat leftovers. Of course, if there are people in need, health issues, they have to eat meat. So number one, if they have to eat meat, then at least if they can, let them eat leftovers, because leftovers, anyway, you have the Chidah. And then also, if not, let them eat chicken, because chicken, really, Me'ikar Din HaGemara, the Gemara only talks about the week of Tisha B'Av, about not having meat during the Suda HaMafsekes, the meal we have before Tisha B'Av. So if you're going to have meat for health reasons or other things, if it's okay for the diet, one should have chicken rather than meat, because the whole Isser is only like red meat and not chicken, which is biblically not meat. It's only rabbinical meat. We're concerned you're going to confuse it and have, if you eat chicken and milk, then you can have meat and milk as well. So that's the Chidah's suggestion based on our Gemara, but the minhag is not that way. So that's what the Gemara tells in Chulin, based on our Gemara in this week's Parsha, Ubata Malayim Kol Tuv, that there was a concept for at least a certain special dispensation for a certain time period, that the Jewish people, when they entered the land of Israel, were permitted to have non-kosher food. In fact, that's a whole discussion. The Ramban writes in Parshas Matos. He wants to bring the issue about, because we had the mitzvah in Parshas Matos of Hagaz Kelim, the mitzvah of koshering our vessels. That we know that any kelim that became treif through fire, so you kosher them through fire, through hot water, so you kosher them through hot water. So the Ramban writes in Parshas Matos, after the Mechamas Midjan, it was after the fight with Midjan, they were warned about the kosher kelim. There had many wars before this, so why did the Torah wake up by the Mechamas Midjan to tell us make sure about the laws about koshering your vessels, and not about letting the war with Sichon and Og? They also took leftovers there. They took the spoils. So Talmud Davos, the Ramban writes, Vishum she'eretz Sichon v'Og hu chelok shel Eretz Yisrael. Since it was part of the war of the 7 years of the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, v'hu telem kol shalom. Afil asurim, as the Torah says, about the way kol tuv, they were permitted to eat. So it was kosher, so to speak, and therefore they didn't have to worry about koshering their kelim. They were permitted to eat this food. Aval Eretz Midjan, when they fought against Midjan, Einu Chelok Shel, it wasn't part of the conquest of Eretz Yisrael. It was part of the revenge. It was part of taking Nakama on the Midjan, and L'chein Huto Hama Isser, and therefore they weren't permitted to eat these foods, and therefore if treif got involved in their vessels, they'd have to kosher them, and therefore they had to know the laws of kashrus. And that's what and that's the question, whether if this applies also to yayin nesach, to wine that could be used on the wine libations. So the Rambam, Maimonides even permitted yayin nesach, but Cholek HaRabban and the Ramban Nechmanides disagrees and says ve'eno emes, that this wasn't true. Shabachol Yisuria Vodazara, he atzma, everything that was used and accessories are kol asar, as it says sheket. It quotes another pasuk that the heter never extended the things that they used with the Vodazara. So that's also says a machlokes, the Ramban, how far the heter, whether it included yayin nesach, wine that could have been used or used for wine libations, as well as how general was permission given to eat from this food. And therefore all this discussion is based on the pasuk in this week's Pasha, Batam Leim Kol Tuv, the special dispensation given to the Jewish people to be able to eat Kadri de Chazeri during this time period.